So, are metalheads stuck in the past?
It certainly seems so.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to TUGGtv. Now, today's episode, essentially, we wanted to talk about a genre of metal music which is by far the most popular among the family of metal music, and we're talking about thrash metal. So, thrash, of course, has been around nearly
For almost 3.5 decades now.
That's right. And this genre of music was started off by or made popular by what we call the big four of thrash metal. These predominantly comprise of the bands Megadeth, Metallica, Anthrax, and Slayer.
Whenever we think about these bands, the first albums which come to our mind are like Megadeth's Peace Cells, Metallica's Master of Puppets, Slayer's Rain and Blood, and Anthrax Among the Living. These albums are more than 3 decades old, These are bands which have been around for like 30 years and they're still active. Is there any particular reason why we think about them only with these albums?
These bands are still alive and making plenty of good music. However, the newer music always doesn't get the same amount of light shed on as compared to the iconic ones. So this episode essentially is focused around that fact. So we want to talk about what is essentially our list of top albums made by the big four post the turn of the century. So the albums that we're going to be talking about today are albums we feel that really made an impact by each of these bands post the year 2000. Give this video a thumbs up if you like what you see, and be sure to subscribe to us and hit that bell icon for more updates from us. Starting things off, let's start with Anthrax. Don't take them for granted. They've got some really amazing music and they have been doing it for 30 years, and if you haven't checked them out.
So the album which we're going to be focusing on for Anthrax is going to be For All Kings. The album was released in 2016 and it kind of gave this back to form feeling for Anthrax, because they were coming off of the heels of like the Bush era, wherein it was more about like grungy sounds.
Yeah, I think that was a period. We can all agree that most of the bands, I'd say all the bands, were going through this.
Yeah, they were influenced to kind of like try towards the new metal side of things.
And there also was a slump with Joey Belladonna sort of going out of the band and then coming back in. So all that sort of contributed. One thing that truly would stand out in this album was the introduction of a new guitarist in the band. So this was the time when Jonathan Donaisis took over, and we could say he added color to the music.
It kind of added a new feel to the whole band per se, because it was a necessary element at that time.
I mean, they still had the thrashy elements, but it had a different feel and flow once, Jonathan joined the band. And I would say that it was for the better.
And also, when you think about the album's lyrical content, it kind of seemed a bit more grounded compared to the previous one. Because as we told, Anthrax is always known about this, mixture of fun elements and social issues combined. But this album seemed to focus more on the social side of things rather than just, kind of having a party.
That's right. So I think depending on how you look at it, it was a slightly darker Anthrax album or a more grown-up one. So next up among the big four, none other than Slayer. This band, of course, does not need an introduction. They redefined the thrash sound and brought it towards the death side of things. Some iconic albums, some iconic songs through like the 80s and the early 90s. This band also did have this slump era with Undisputed Attitude being towards hardcore punk. Diabolus and Musica had all sorts of problems, including a murky production. A couple of lineup changes also. You had Lombardo go, then Best Of It come in, then Best Of It Lombardo came in. And however, they did have a return to form with 2001's God Hates Us All. The album that we want to talk about, which to us really stands out, is 2006's Christ Illusions.
So this was the album which saw Lombardo getting back on the drummer's seat for Slayer and had the classic lineup back all together. And it was kind of this really weird reception from the get-go, because the artwork was quite controversial. Even though we as metalheads loved it, there was a lot of issue going on, and I think it kind of started with India itself, with a church in Mumbai kind of going away from the artwork.
Yeah, I don't know. For those of you who have not seen the original artwork, it had heads cut off, and those
Yeah,
comprised of
basically a
Gandhi,
decapitated head of
Gandhi and
Mother
Mother
Teresa,
Teresa, so-
Jesus being like completely. Okay.
It was controversial.
Yeah, it
if
was
you haven't checked it out. One reason why I feel this album really stands out is, in my opinion, this album was the biggest risk ever
Yeah.
for its time. Firstly, let's come to the lyrical themes. This album dealt with stuff like terrorism, warfare, religious or anti-religious elements.
A lot
depending on how
of
you look at
current
it.
social issues which were going around during that time.
That is true, and not just that. I mean, they had the balls to do songs like Jihad. Jihad essentially talks about 9/11 from a terrorist's point of view, and back then 9/11 was still pretty fresh in
Yeah.
everyone's minds. And then these guys go ahead and do a song like this. Skeleton Christ was another song that really rattled a lot of cages. It rattled the cages of, I think, the Christian Secular Forum,
Yes.
who deemed the song, I think it was an insult to Christianity and all of
Yeah,
that.
religion.
However, I mean, what really stands out is not only did they have the guts to do this, but they did it with complete conviction.
Yeah.
There wasn't this sugar coating and, we're trying to talk about this, but we want to be
Yeah,
politically
there
right.
was no, I'm trying to be
Yeah.
edgy with all of these things. It was just in your face. Yeah, this is how it is. On the musical side of things, you had Lombardo back on the drums, and as we
Signature
told,
Lombardo rolls.
yeah, it was just killer drumming all the way. And the thing to be noted in this album was that Tom Araya's vocals kind of had that flow to it. Like it was him at his peak.
Absolutely. Next up among the big four, we have Megadeth. So Megadeth, up until this point, had a lot of twists and turns in their journey. Starting things off around 1999, they came up with Risk, which was not received very well, by his core audience. He also had massive lineup changes at this time. There was also that period where he
He was suffering from
he
palsy.
was palsy. So Megadeth was on. I mean, it was sort of discontinued for a brief.
Yeah, there
minute,
was a
and then
small
he took it
hiatus that
back.
they'd gone down in.
So yeah, all of that. 3 more albums which were
Just me. It's just lukewarm.
yeah. And after that, come 2009, he gives us Endgame. Let's start off with what was unique about Endgame. First album with Chris Broderick.
Yeah, this was the first one where he entered.
So, I mean, Chris Broderick, no doubt, is a master player of the guitar. But what we really think stands out with this album is with the introduction of Chris Broderick. Firstly, I mean, the lineup worked.
Yeah.
And it had a very familiar feel. You could almost say it had the Rust in Peace era feel.
Yeah, it had these similar feelings what you have towards the Megadeth of the early eras, like, during your Peace Cells and everything. It kind of seemed aligned with it.
That's right. And I mean, long story short, all killer, no filler in this. Pretty much it. That was what really stood out with this album.
Not only was this album like a completely well-produced album, but it had these killer riffs along it. It had the brutality, it had that in-your-face attitude, and it was kind of a redemption for all the fans who were waiting post-Risk era, because this was the album that they were waiting for. Is to kind of like see Megadeth in their natural sense.
Yeah, and that was a full-blown proper Megadeth album. I mean, let's agree, Head Crusher still rings in my head. That was a great song, and it's very memorable. That's what set this album apart from the rest. Another thing I would say that really stands out with Megadeth is the songwriting process.
Yes.
Now, up until this time, since we're talking post-2000s, we're going to keep it from maybe The System Has Failed. So we had The System Has Failed, we had The World Needs a Hero, we then had United Abominations. Now, all these albums, if you look at the content of it, is predominantly political.
Yeah, and it was more political towards the US side.
Yeah,
of things,
the
because,
American
let's
side
face
of
it,
it.
US band.
Yeah, which is cool. It's just that, around the rest of the world, not all of us could directly relate and, feel what was being said from the political side of things. However, with Endgame, Dave Mustaine took a slightly different approach, where he moved a little away from the political aspect and brought in a lot of human emotion and different emotional aspects into it. For example, Head Crusher talked about torture. We then had a song called 44 Minutes, which spoke about war. Yes, okay, you might think that's political too, but more about war. The Right to Go Insane is a very interesting song because depending on how you look at it, it talks about PTSD. And PTSD is a big problem in the world out there. So this addresses that. The Hardest Part of Letting Go, another great song. I mean, this pretty much the way I interpret it is it talks about processing grief. So a lot of great songs in it and memorable because this album is now what, a decade old, and
it's almost a decade old.
And I'm talking about these songs like I heard them yesterday. So, and lastly, I have to say, now this is my personal theory, but if you have to watch the music video of Head Crusher, I would say that it was pro-feminism at the time. Why? Just watch the video. It's a woman who's sort of brought in and people are laughing at her, and the next thing you know, she's kicking everybody's asses. So I mean, that was a good touch to it. It goes against the stereotype. So for those of you who say, metal is all about,
it's a man's game.
It's a man's game. Firstly, bullshit. Second, watch this video. Next up, for a lack of better words, the most well-known, popular and
most
commercially successful among the big four. We're talking about none other than Metallica. So first things first, among the big four, these guys gave us the least albums.
When you see it purely from a numbers perspective.
That's right. So we're talking about 3 albums in 19 years. And we're not counting Lulu. That was not a Metallica album.
It was a collaboration.
Yeah, it was a collaboration. Among the 3, we're predominantly talking about Saint Anger. Let's not get into it. That thing has been beaten to death.
Yeah, like the trash can that it was in.
Anyway, moving forward. We then had Death Magnetic, which came out in 2009. I mean, it wasn't memorable, but the only reason it stood out was because Saint Anger was worse. Sorry, man. It's not that I have a problem with the musical aspect of that album. I think it had some good songs. That's my perspective. It's just the production was horrible. And lastly, that brings us to the latest album they released in 2016.
Hardwired.
Yep, that's the number we pick, and that's Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
So coming off of the passage of the Load era, Reload era, Saint Anger and everything, Hardwired kind of feels like a really good album. And even when you split it apart from the rest of their discography, there are memorable riffs which are there in it. True. It might not be the perfect album which is out there, but it certainly shows that it has potential. Metallica still has that early 80s, attitude towards music. They want to get it out, but then probably for a lot of different reasons are not able to, are not willing to. I mean, that's a whole different story.
Definitely a partial return to form, we could say. If I had to place this album, I would personally say it's somewhere between And Justice for All and maybe the Black Album.
It's a semi-commercial but then yet thrashy album. So.
Yeah, I mean, it had some good numbers on it, and I could relate to some of them. Things like Hardwired to Self-Destruct, that was proper thrash. Spit Out the Bone was an absolutely blistering song on that album. There were many more which also, we liked and we could relate to. It also had a little bit of that commercial element going on. I mean, let's not forget, they played Moth and Flame at the Grammys with Lady Gaga and, all the technical mishaps. But yeah, it had potential. It had lyrical themes that had some depth to it.
And also, I think after a long time, we actually saw Lars trying his best to drum.
Yeah, that's agreed. What makes this album stand out is, I'd say, is the first time in 19 years we heard Lars doing proper drumming. So that's definitely a standout there, especially in songs like Hardwired and Spit Out the Bone and all that, because that was the first time in a long time I'm like, wait, double bass, Metallica album.
Can he?
Not bad. We definitely heard a Metallica revisiting their glory days, you could say, and taking a couple of excerpts from it, putting it to good use. However, if I had to point out or critique something, I would still say, they are not using Robert Trujillo to his full potential. That's that.
Yeah. The only concern what we have is it shouldn't end up back like the Jason era.
I don't know, man. At this point, I don't see that happening because Trujillo has now been with the band longer than Jason was. But if you hear songs like Spit Out the Bone, he has a part with the bass solo and all that, and you listen to it and you're like, this dude has so much potential. Yeah, rather than just keep him as a running bass, I personally think he's sort of Metallica's second coming after Cliff Burton. He's got those elements, so use the guy.
They need to utilize him.
Yeah, so hopefully if we get another Metallica album, I mean, they do take their time
or
with
if they see this video, and if they are, hello.
Dear Metallica, give us another Master of Puppets. It's okay. So with that, we come to the end of our list of the top albums of the Big Four post the year 2000.
Let us know what you guys felt about our picks. Were the reviews justified? Do you have a different approach? Do you have a different album which you feel have to be mentioned here? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you like this format of the video, what we're doing, let us know which other genre of metal that you would like to see us. Like, there are a lot more genres out there that we can
There's
cover.
no shortage of genres. If there is a certain genre you want us to cover or certain bands you want us to look into, we're happy to do this post 2000s thing again. So once again, if you like what you see, be sure to hit a thumbs up and that subscribe button along with the bell icon. We cover a lot of content from a metal music perspective, be it skits, be it covers, collaborations, and stuff like this.
Originals. You
Yeah,
forgot
plenty of that. So this is TUGGtv signing off. Until next time.
Stay metal.